My name is Minerve Jean. I live in Miami, the land of the Seminole, Taino, and Tequesta peoples. I'm an inclusion fellow and action team leader at Climate and Culture, which we meet bi-monthly. And I will be introducing Kea. So Kea Rutherford is a Columbia University student from Scarsdale, New York. Her mother's side of the family is from Tabiong and Tabuewa on Rambi and Banaba. She is currently a freshman at Columbia University. Her efforts to aid the Banaban community initially began in the summer of 2021 when she created a Fundly page to aid the Banabans in Fiji during COVID-19. From there, she was inspired to create the Fiery Canoe Foundation in order to aid Banabans everywhere. Today, a 501c3 certified nonprofit organization, the Fiery Canoe Foundation has raised over $23,000 for the Banaban cause and has worked with activists and aid workers in Fiji to solicit projects consistent with our mission of promoting Banaban culture, well-being, and heritage. The title of her session is The Story of Banaba, a lesson for all of us. And again, if you have any questions, please use the Q&A chat feature. And with that, I will turn it over to Kea.
Thank you so much, Minerve, for that wonderful introduction. So yes, my name is Kea Rutherford. I'm currently a Columbia University student calling from New York, traditional Lenape lands. And I just want to thank Minerve and the organizers again. I'm very excited to be a part of this conference. It's my first CCL conference. And it's such an honor to be following Kathy. She knew my aunt Teresia very well, and her presentation was very moving and powerful. Okay. So I did also have a little switch up in the title of my presentation, but it is Teapa Nri, the story of Banaba. So Teapa Nri essentially means land of bones or land of ancestors and can be interpreted in a couple of other ways. But as we get into the presentation, we'll see how this describes the story of Banaba. Oh, okay. So the story of Banaba. Banaba is an island located in the Pacific near the equator. It is also known as Ocean Island, and it is part of the Republic of Kiribati. It is a small, raised coral atoll with a land area of approximately 6 square kilometers or 2.5 square miles. Banaba is one of the world's most important phosphate-rich islands, along with Nauru, Makatea in French Polynesia, and Anguar in Palau. So Banaba was sustainably inhabited for over 2,000 years. And in 1900, the British annexed the island. The Rest Agreement did not make clear the long-term environmental impacts of phosphate mining to the Banaban people. It granted the Pacific Islands Company a 999-year lease for an annual fee of £50 or 4,200 pounds in today's money. And essentially, Banaba was grouped together with the islands of Kiribati by the British when it was annexed. So the result of this agreement was that for the next 8 decades, almost all of Banaba's original surface was removed under the direction of the British Phosphate Commissioners of Australia, New Zealand, and the United Kingdom. Mining left the land unable to sustain human life. So during World War II, Japan also targeted Banaba for its mines, and the Banaban people were not evacuated. While the British Phosphate Company employees did, the Banaban people were left while the occupiers established a brutal rule where many Banabans perished from starvation or torture. So once the war was over, however, mining resumed, and to expedite phosphate extraction and accommodate the island's decreasing ability to support life, the British colonial government forcibly relocated the majority of the Banaban population to Rambi Island in Fiji. Enrilled with limestone pinnacles, years of mining polluted Banaba's primary source of fresh drinking water and has caused the loss of much of its pandanus, coconut, almond, and other food sources. Now living on Rambi Island in Fiji, those who experienced the horrors of mining recall Banaba's natural beauty with sorrow. And this is Banaba, and kind of showing how they were displaced to Rambi Island in Fiji. So the Banabans have attempted to obtain reparations from the British Phosphate Commission and the 3 countries responsible for mining, Australia, New Zealand, and the United Kingdom. However, to date, these these efforts have been unsuccessful. The Banabans received minimal royalties or other benefits from the mining operations, and Banaban compensation has been estimated at less than 0.1% of the profit generated from agricultural farming, shipping, and manufacturing businesses supported by the British Phosphate Company in Australia, New Zealand, and the UK. Instead, Banaban land was sacrificed to run the Gilbert and Ellis Islands colony, now Kiribati and Tuvalu, and support a critical input for a global superphosphate fertilizer and food supply chain. So when the Banabans tried to take the matter to court, essentially the British acknowledged their actions and proceeded to give them very minimal compensation. The Banabans were given a trust fund. However, the amount was nowhere near the profit generated from mining. The Banabans lost many elders and holders of customary knowledge and traditions during mining and the war, but they did their best to rebuild their culture in Fiji on Rambi, and these are some pictures from Rambi. And several families have now migrated to Australia and Aotearoa in New Zealand or the US. And Rambi currently has no central electricity supply and limited infrastructure, health, financial, and community facilities. But nevertheless, there is a vibrant and creative community across 4 villages who, with their families abroad, maintain their care for and connection to their ancestral island that awaits proper justice and rehabilitation. So moving on to the fiery canoe conviction. This is a picture of me and my grandfather. So my great-grandfather, my grandfather's grandfather, Tainamo, lived in Banaba with his mother, or lived on Banaba with his mother, Keawea. His son, Tewa, my grandfather's father, was sent to live with relatives in Tabachuea, Kiribati, where he had a son named Tabakitoa, my grandfather. Tewa Tabakitoa and his mother, Takea, traveled to Banaba in the mid-1940s to find it unrecognizable. Destroyed by phosphate mining, much of Banaba's topsoil had been removed and sacred lands were decimated. My kaka, or my grandfather, left Banaba as a child as a part of the British Phosphate Company's forcible relocation of the remaining Banaban population to Rambi and the Fiji Islands. So the Banabans lost everything except their strong desire to maintain their culture and traditions. They reestablished Banaba's 4 villages on Rambi, including our family's village of Tabyang and my great-grandfather's village of Tabewa. So my kaka became the first Banaban to obtain a Fiji government scholarship and attend university. He traveled far from home to study at the University of Hawaii at Manoa and meet my grandmother. And my kaka had 9 brothers and sisters, and as the eldest and most educated, it was his job to maintain the welfare of the Tewa's Kanga, which is a family residence and community. And it now consists of over 60 children, 100 grandchildren and great-grandchildren, and many of whom live at Tabona, just outside the village of Tabyang on Rambi. My grandfather became Fiji's permanent Secretary of Agriculture, Fisheries and Forestry, and Urban Rural Development for many years before returning to Rambi to chair the island's Council of Leaders and serve as the Banaban representative in the Kiribati Parliament in the late 90s and early 2000s. So my grandfather's efforts as a Banaban leader and advocate lived on in the contributions of his 3 daughters, Teresia, Katerina, and Maria Tewa, my mom. So my Aunt Teresia, a leading and beloved Pacific Studies scholar, teacher, and activist in Aotearoa, New Zealand, inspired countless people through her voice and poetry. When she passed away in 2017, I was overwhelmed by the outpouring from scholars and political leaders and activists who celebrated her contributions to Pacific culture, education, and history. And I also really just wanted to share a couple of her quotes, my favorite of her most famous quotes, which is, agriculture isn't in our blood, but our blood is in agriculture, and we sweat and cry salt water, so we know that the ocean is really in our blood. My Aunt Katerina, an anthropologist and professor at the Australian National University who strongly advocates for the Banaban community through her works, also wrote a book called Consuming Ocean Island that details the destruction of Banaba by phosphate mining in the 20th century. And she also has an art exhibition dedicated to telling the story of Banaba, which I'll touch on more later. And finally, my mother, Maria Tewa, an obstetrician gynecologist, has leveraged her skills and knowledge to aid the Banaba community through medical missions to Tangaru Central Hospitals in Kiribati, and helped me begin my journey of advocating for the Banaba community. Inspired by my mom and aunts and kaka, I wanted to learn more about my heritage and brainstorm ways that I could aid the Banaba community. I was going to school in New York, being far from the Pacific. While I cannot be there right now, I wanted to give back anything I could to my community. So my grandfather's full name is John Tabakitoa Tewa, since Banaba sons take their father's first names as their last, and my great-grandfather's name was Tewa. And Tewa in Kiribati language translates to mean fiery canoe, such as the outriggers once used for inter-island travel. So as I launched my own advocacy on behalf of Pacific Islanders, I took inspiration from our family name and founded the Fiery Canoe Foundation. So we essentially began by, as Minerve said earlier, raising $6,000 using a Fundly page in 2021 to help obtain resources for the Banaba community during COVID-19 and get our foundation off the ground. So this is Ray Beintis, a social worker who helps us a lot. He's an integral part of the projects we donate to, how we get them running, and kind of following through. And he actually went around in 2021 to individual households providing COVID relief. So after we had the Fundly page, we went to speak with Dr. Satendra Prasad, who was the Fiji ambassador to the UN at the time, and decided to expand our efforts to aiding the Banaba community as a whole instead of primarily during COVID-19. So today, a 501c3 certified nonprofit organization, the Fiery Canoe Foundation has raised over $23,000 for the Banaba cause and has worked with activists and aid workers to donate to projects identified by the Banaba community as priorities. So Fiery Canoe today. So essentially through our launch benefit dinner, we raised the majority of our money there. We raised 23,000 USD, which is actually 50,000 Fiji dollars, translates to about that for the Banaba community. And moving on, these are just more images from the event. And so after that, we began donating to projects. And as of now, we have donated to 4 projects, one targeted at reengaging and empowering Banaba and Rambian youths through sports, one that helped to revive the Banaba cultural dancing group, one that actually helped the launch of the Banaba cultural dancing group at an event that I'll get into very soon, and a project concerning the Banaba primary school. So for the first project, which was the re-engaging, I forgot to mention, thanks to Ray Beintis and Krista Kirchenheider, we were able to donate to these these projects and kind of get them running, which was very good. So the first project was re-engaging and empowering Banaba and Rambian youths through sports. And this was a health and well-being, sports, and youth project. So over the years, financial support for youth empowerment programs has decreased dramatically, and for many reasons, including a lack of sustainable funding and partnership. At the village level, youths have resorted to kava and substance abuse, creating a myriad of social issues on the island. The youth population of Rambi comprises over 50% of the island's 5,000 people from the 4 villages, namely Tabewa, Uma, Tabyang, and Bokanikai. Therefore, this was a very important target group for this project, and this project aimed to actively re-engage the island's youthful population using sports as a tool for empowerment and development. This project was also a response to the request submitted by the Ramby Council of Leaders and a letter annexed to this project proposal to support the purchase of sporting equipment, coaching fees, prizes, and the revival of traditional sports like weaving and husking coconuts during the 77th anniversary to remember the first arrival on Ramby. So this project was essentially implemented from the 15th to the 17th of December in 2022 because when the Bonamans first arrived on Ramby, they arrived on December 15th, 1945. So every year, the 15th is a celebration of their progress and being displaced to a new island and kind of their resilience there. So the project took place in Nuku Ramby and engaged all youth clubs from all 4 villages. And beyond the week of the celebrations, village youth sports associations were empowered to re-engage their youth constituencies. So this project was crucial to address the disengagement of youths on Ramby at the present time, as the lack of sustainable funding and partnership had led to the withdrawal of funding support of youth-led initiatives on the island, including financing sports initiatives. So lack of engagement with youths at the island level through the Ramby Island Youth Association and the Ramby Council of Leaders has also become an issue because of resource and capacity constraints. So on Ramby Sport is an effective tool to bring the youths and communities together. This project, therefore, touched the lives of many people and communities in many ways. More youth sports clubs were engaged throughout the week of the 15s on Ramby, thus increasing the number of youths engaged. Youths were diverted to sports and continued to be engaged during the school break because the project supported them through the provision of sports equipment. This project enabled village youth sports associations to continue engaging their young people. The longer-term outcome of this project was to minimize youth issues using sports as intervention, essentially. Moving on, the next project we donated to or funded was the revival of the Banaba Cultural Dancing Group through the provision of musical instruments. This was a culture, heritage, dance, and music project, and this project aimed to help revive the defunct Banaba Cultural Dancing Group on Ramby through the provision of musical instruments, as I said before. Since 2021, there had been discussions by former members of the Banaba Cultural Dancing Group to revive the dancing group and recruit new members. This year, the members had volunteered their time towards reviving the dancing group with the hope to continue dancing lessons and costume making in 2023. The lack of support for maintaining and sustainability of the Banaba Cultural Dancing Group on Ramby may result in the extinction of Banaba dance. Because of financial constraints, the Ramby Council of Leaders could no longer support cultural teachers being stationed in all of the schools on Ramby for over a decade now. And since there's a lack of advocacy and lobbying to national, regional, and global partners to contribute to the preservation of Banaba Indigenous, this project aimed to help revitalize Banaba dance with the hope to strengthen it and expand its programs to all schools on Ramby. So leading into that is the launch of the Banaba Cultural Dancing Group this August at the Ramby Island Community Hub's Youth Climate Change Leadership Partnership Summit. I'm so sorry. This project was a cultural repatriation project and occurred this year at Ramby Island Community Hub's World Indigenous Day event. So Ramby Island Community Hub, also known as RICH, brought together youths, women, and the general population of Banabans living in Ramby to celebrate World Indigenous Day for the first time on August 9th, 2023. Framed as the RICH Youth Climate Change Leadership and Partnership Summit, it adopted this year's World Indigenous Day theme of Indigenous youths as agents of change for self-determination. And a series of events was organized for the 2 days, which included the launching of key reports published by RICH, sports events, launching of the Banaba Cultural Dancing Group, and strengthening relationships with Greenpeace Australia Pacific. So the objectives for the RICH Youth Climate Change and Partnership Summit were storytelling and sharing of campaigns and lessons on climate impact and strategies to collaborate better and highlight Ramby and the Banaba story of forcible relocation and climate leadership that the island is showing at the global stage. They also wanted to launch key reports from RICH and have a mural titled A Forced Relocation Activism Project. And they were going to use sports again as a tool for youth climate change advocacy. There was a Ramby High School speech contest, and there was the launch of the Banaba Cultural Dancing Group. So one of Rich's work during this 2-day World Indigenous Day event was to revive the Banaba Cultural Dancing Group in Ramby. Efforts began in 2022 when Canoe donated to help revive the dancing group with a few remaining elders and knowledge holders on Ramby. And Banaba dance is significant in keeping culture alive, since it is in art also used as a tool for storytelling. So at this event, the dancing group launched their full show to depict the story of Banaba forcible displacement through dance. And this project benefited approximately 400 of the youths on Ramby, over 200 women from 26 women's clubs under the Banaba Women Organization, approximately 300 children from the Banaba Primary School, and community members of all ages, diversity, and abilities. So the final project we funded was an educational project for the Banaba Primary School. The Canoe Foundation funded the purchase of 2 projectors to provide for the large role of 407 students and 15 teachers at the Banaba Primary School on Ramby in order to cater for teaching needs on a daily basis. So according to Mr. Fiafia Sikayo, the Banaba Primary School has 24 hours of solar power supply, and all classrooms have been wired by CBS. The Banaba people have become resilient after relocation and have the capacity to develop all facets of development that will bring change to the island as a whole. Education is the key to enable this, and they have maintained their role over 400 in the past years. So I also just wanted to give another shout out to Ray Beintis and Pelanise Alofa. Ray is the director of the Ramby Island Community Hub, and Pelanise is a Banaba elder and sits on the board of the Canoe Foundation. And they have been huge parts in identifying projects to donate to, as well as carrying them out. So thank you very much to Ray and Pelanise. Moving on to events Canoe has participated in. We participated in an Earth Day in the Pacific presentation last spring in conjunction with the Iowa City Foreign Relations Council, courtesy of Mike Roman. Thank you very much for inviting us to speak there. And we were also very fortunate to be a part of the launch of Pacific SOS, which is an initiative led by Ruben Chung, who is a high school student in Geneva, Switzerland, who created Pacific SOS, or Sharing Our Stories. And Pacific SOS had its official launch on International Youth Day, which was also in August 12th. And during the month of August, it highlighted Indigenous stories in honor of August 9th, World Indigenous Peoples Day, which was another event we sponsored on Ramby / donated to. And Pacific SOS is essentially a platform where people can share their stories of climate change in the Pacific, as well as their efforts and hopes to combat it. Finally, in terms of FCF Canoe Foundation plans, as I mentioned before, my Aunt Katerina Tewa has a exhibition called Project Banaba, and it's been to a few different places, but now it's coming to the US, and it details the story of Banaba and really forcible relocation. And essentially it's going to be in Hawaii from November to February in Honolulu, the Bishop Museum. If anybody is in Honolulu from that time, please, please, please visit this wonderful exhibit. And Canoe also will continue to donate to projects the Banaba community identifies as priorities, and do our best to fundraise as best we can to accommodate the growing number of projects we would like to donate to. So moving on to Ramby currently. So as I mentioned before, with the project of the Banaba Cultural Dancing Group, World Indigenous Peoples Day was celebrated around the globe on August 9th and people were encouraged to spread the United Nations message on the protection and promotion of the rights of Indigenous peoples. And this year's theme, once again, was Indigenous youths as agents of change for self-determination. So the special administrator for Rambi Island and Banaba MP to the Kittiwas Parliament, Jacob Kurtake, conveyed his sincerest gratitude to both ministers for choosing Rambi to commemorate this special day, and the Minister for Women, Children, and Social Protection, Honorable Linda Tambuya, was accompanied by the Assistant Minister for Itake Affairs, Heritage, and Arts, Honorable Tuiwe Lebu, as they officiated World Indigenous Day commemoration on Rambi Island. So the celebration began with a march led by the Buakani Kai Methodist Brass Band before the official program began. And in her opening remarks, Minister Tambuya conveyed her appreciation to the Rambi Council of Leaders on the invitation to be the guest of honor at the celebrations, and noted her delight in witnessing firsthand the different norms and traditions that made their Indigenous culture a unique one. So this is a statement from her. We, the Indigenous peoples, are inheritors and practitioners of our unique cultures and ways of relating to people and the environment. We strive to retain our social, cultural, and economic and political characteristics that are distinct from those of the dominant societies in which we live. So also, while speaking on this year's theme, Honorable Tambuya elaborated that Indigenous youth are working as agents of change at the forefront of some of the most pressing crises facing humanity today. The new generation of Indigenous advocates are mobilizing to shift the narrative around Indigenous people. They've become the driving force for societal change through social mobilization, making use of online platforms to showcase and celebrate their cultures, languages, knowledge systems to a wider audience. So also in launching Justice for Rambi, the Story of Banaba exhibition, Honorable Tuiwe Lebu noted that the Ministry of Itauke takes pride in preserving culture and identity, and we congratulate you for this undertaking. Honorable Tambuya also launched the Banaba Women's Organization Strategic Plan for 2023 to 2027, and the minister commended the women on Rambi for getting ahead by presenting their 5-year strategic plan to the ministry so that their needs were ascertained. And in reaffirming the government's stand, Minister Tambuya assured the Banaba people that we recognize the value of our diverse cultural identities and will continue to work towards strengthening the revival and preserving our diverse traditions, cultural identities, natural resources, and languages. And then, I'm so sorry. Also, a part of this celebration was the crew from YWAM ships, Terra, and the Greenpeace Warrior. That's the scene here. Oh, I'm so sorry, those are also yes, and then these are more from World Indigenous Day, but still, okay, there we go. But on August 18th, so this was August 9th, and this was a 2-day event. But right now, this was from August 18th, which was International Youth Day. And SBC, UN, Human Rights Pacific, and partners celebrated International Youth Day 2023 and marked the 75th anniversary of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. The day was an opportunity to recognize the contributions of Pacific youth to amplify youth voices and affect positive change. So International Youth Day also had a general theme, which was green skills for youth towards a sustainable world. So SBC's Human Rights and Social Development Division recognized the pressing need for climate justice and effective collaborative action, and sought to empower Pacific youth and support them in driving sustainable development and addressing environmental challenges. So this is a statement from Honorable Jessie Sakaru, Minister of the Fijian Ministry of Youth and Sports. He stated that young people are indeed the backbone of our society. They are the change makers, and we must empower them with the necessary knowledge, skills, and tools to champion environmental conservation. So SBC's Human Rights and Social Development Division Director Miles Young said that important days such as the commemoration of the UDHR anniversary, which was Universal Declaration of Human Rights, and International Youth Day were opportunities to share as well as celebrate, celebrate as well as pause and engage to set our compass right on the journey towards sustainable development for all Pacific peoples as our mandate. And then another statement from Lavitanalangi Seru, a youth advocate and leader and climate coordinator at Pacific Islands Climate Action Network, or PCAN. Pacific youth are not only envisioning a greener future, but they are shaping it through their actions. Their innovative spirit is a reminder that change is possible and hope knows no bounds. Let us foster a dynamic exchange of ideas as together we can turn the tide of the ecological crisis we confront. So SBC also acknowledged the vital role youth play in building a positive and sustainable future locally, regionally, and globally. And then right here was the Rambi Island Community Hub's team setting up their exhibition corner for International Youth Day on August 18th this year. And once again, they are celebrating the 75th Human Rights and the International Youth Day. So moving on August 30th, there was a strengthening civil engagement meeting with the UN Office of Human Rights in Suva, Fiji, which was attended by Ray Beintes as well as volunteers and other elders. So moving on to the most pressing issue right now on Rambi concerning the Banaba community. So right now there is a proposal in place between an Australian mining company called Centrex to explore the possibility of remining Banaba. Despite the fact that I just shared with you all the history of Banaba and how phosphate mining essentially destroyed a once thriving island, made it uninhabitable, decimated sacred lands, and caused its community to be forcibly relocated, there are still powers today that try to further desecrate the island. Right now, a very complex situation is happening. An agreement was made with a Rambi administrator and a mining company. However, there was no consent from Banaban landowners to approve this agreement about exploring the remining possibilities. And the agreement claimed it wanted to rehabilitate the land, despite the fact that we know mining does the exact opposite. As is demonstrated by mining the first time around, mining would cause the loss of vegetation by clearing the site for drilling, blasting, and mining. Farming land would also be affected. Open cut mining would cause heavy sediment runoffs during wet weather and massive dust pollution in the dry season. The dust emitted may cause irritation to skin, eyes, throat, etc., which may cause coughing, sneezing, and wheezing, and other very serious health-related issues may arise if this project continues to go forward. So Centrex is an Australian-based exploration company whose main activity includes phosphate exploration and extraction. Thankfully, since many Banabans were protesting this proposal, petitions were circulating, and many protests were happening, we've acquired a temporary halt to the agreement. So no mining progress will be going forward as of now, thankfully, but it would be best to completely abolish the agreement. Petitions have been circulated, and my aunt Katerina Tewa and Ray Beintes, who I mentioned earlier, has been helping us a lot with projects on the ground, have been very essential in stopping the potential remining of Banaba. So, as my aunt Katerina said, land is identity and nobody can take it from its rightful owners. We must abolish this proposal in order to protect our homeland and our history. So I also have another statement from former Ramsey Council of Leaders, Chairman and former Fiji Permanent Secretary for Agriculture, Fisheries, and Forestry, John Tabakitoatewa, my grandfather. Kamna Maori, I think that discussions about exploration for phosphate mining should stop completely, and the island should be revitalized. We should rehabilitate the island to support life. That island is our very identity. We must revitalize and rehabilitate it. It can be done. Fill it with soil and plant it with crops and coconut trees. There are governments that would be happy to help us ship soil back. We don't want to completely destroy it, for heaven's sake. I feel sad that I can't work on this issue, but you can, and I'm glad for those doing something to save Banaba. Our identity will not be lost, so it is important to restore the island. I also have a lot of links to relevant articles concerning the remining proposal. If there could be a way to share that, I do not know yet, but definitely. And this is, once again, my grandfather for his statement. So kind of tying it all back in with climate change, essentially everything is connected. Banaba is an island majorly affected by phosphate mining. Phosphate mining fuels global agriculture, which fuels climate change. The Banaba community is greatly affected by climate change, and with rising sea levels, Banaba and the islands of Kiribati will be the first to be lost to the ocean. Already, high tides flood the first floor of the hospital in Tarawa, with the largest towns in Kiribati. Patients and equipment must be relocated, and power outages are common. So the Banaba story also is not an uncommon one. Small islands and indigenous lands are exploited for their resources by powerful companies regularly. Extraction-based mining, native habitat destruction, and uncontrolled carbon emissions have the potential to destroy Earth's ability to support life. And by raising awareness and educating others about how fertilizer drives global agriculture, which fuels climate change, we hope to better support the Banaba community, a community who, despite the challenges of being heavily impacted by climate change, managed to remain resilient and never stop fighting for their islands. So phosphate mining left Banaba desolate, pinnacle-ridden, and also fuels climate change, which puts Banaba in grave danger. So we should take this as a lesson to never mine Banaba again. And even with that in mind, there are still people who want to explore the possibility of remining. But as I said before, this is not an uncommon story. So similar to Banaba, mining like this is happening on other islands. I would also like to link this article if I can. I have a document of links, if I can find out how to share that. But this is an article about Nauru and another Australian company. Jatax Australia has been accused of bribing Nauruan officials over phosphate mining contracts. So the story is relevant to small indigenous lands everywhere. And while the concept and theme of climate change is globally accepted and getting support, there also needs to be a discussion around the industries that make up and contribute to climate change that fall under the radar. In Banaba's case, it was the British Phosphate Commission, but all around the world, large companies are exploiting small indigenous lands and contributing to climate change. These extractive industries are dangerous and they're overtaxing our environment and destroying sacred lands. Also, if anybody would like to learn more, we are our Canoe Foundation on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube for more info, and some sites. But okay, we have 5 minutes for questions. That's perfect. Is there a way to share? I have a document of links.
Yes, we're actually going to, the links that you've shared previously with me, we're going to compile it and send it out after the conference.
Oh, perfect. Wonderful. Okay.
Yeah, and thank you so much for this wonderful presentation and all the amazing work that you're doing. So I'll go ahead, since we do have 5 minutes, I'll read a few questions from the audience. And if we don't get to all of them, please send your questions to cclusa.org/forums and connect with Kea on social media. So the most popular question right now is, how receptive have the people of the Banaba community been to your climate message? Have you faced challenges on the education/outreach side, or is the climate story ingrained in reality for them because of the sea level changes? By the way, this organization is a massive achievement to have completed at your age. I have no idea how you managed to keep yourself motivated for this amount of impact. It's genuinely incredible. And this comes from Philip Wessel.
Oh, thank you so much. That's so kind. Yes, it's definitely becoming very glaringly obvious as sea levels are rising and becoming more apparent. Banaba actually is, I think, the tallest Kiribati island. Shockingly enough, and now proposal to remine. Why are we going to destroy the largest island that's the least in danger of the rising sea levels? But it's still obviously not that far up the ground. There can always be more education surrounding climate change and kind of the, should I stop sharing my screen? We'll leave the presentation up just in case. There could always be more education in regards to climate change and the rising sea levels. I think the main thing specifically for the Banaba community, though, would be education surrounding mining and how mining feeds into climate change, specifically for Banaba, but also in other islands as well.
Thank you for that. And so this was already half answered in the presentation, but what do you think about the proposal to resume mining in Banaba, and what advocacy is needed around that?
Definitely. So in order to actually halt the mining proposal, there was a petition circulating. It got 500 signatures. My aunt was a very integral part, and she kind of just kept posting, informing everyone of how detrimental and awful this would be. But right now, I think it's just spreading awareness. If we can get as many people as possible to kind of learn the history, learn why we cannot remine again by any means, on Banaba specifically. But yeah, kind of educating people even more about it. And as of now, to combat the proposal, I think just protesting and petitions for now, and hopefully speaking to Banaba landowners in order to get their official no, so that it will not happen.
Absolutely. And so this one comes from SE. Where can we buy a t-shirt?
Oh, working on it. It is in progress, definitely. We are getting there. We had some for our benefit. They were handmade by another one of my aunts, very lovingly, but we are getting on merch. It will come.
We're excited for that. And then I do think we have time for one more question. So what did your grandfather experience in Kiribati on rising sea levels and environmental challenges?
So he lived in Kiribati. He lives now in Fiji, but he lived in Kiribati when he was very little. So I don't think the effects were as prominent as they are today, kind of becoming more glaringly obvious. He lived on Kiribati, or in Kiribati, and then was forcibly relocated with the Banaba community in 1945 when he was very little, 3 to 5, like he was very, very young. So he's lived in Fiji ever since. But even still, yes, he's very upset to see the proposal to remine and the possibility of further destroying Banaba. But in terms of the rising sea levels, I don't think it was something he very closely experienced in Kiribati, but yes, he obviously is willing to kind of speak on it and inspire other people to do their part to stop climate change.
Absolutely. Thank you so much once again for your wonderful presentation. Our time is up with question and answers, but again, please link it in the form if you do have an additional question and connect with Kea on her social media. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Citizens Climate Lobby's training program. You can tune into more episodes anywhere podcasts are available. Inspired by what you heard today? Join Citizens Climate Lobby to advocate for bipartisan climate solutions. Go to community.citizensclimate.org to find more trainings, resources, your local chapter, national action teams, discussion forums, and more. Be sure to like our Facebook page and follow us on Twitter and Instagram @CitizensClimate. We also invite all of our listeners to subscribe to our YouTube channel for more inspiration.
Like what you hear? Recommend us to your friends and make sure to give us a 5-star rating. It helps us show up on other listeners' feeds. Feel free to pass on any suggestions for future episodes in the comments as well.
And together, we are creating the political will for a livable world.